Hey everyone, I'm Jason, a UX/UI designer based in Brisbane, Australia. I've been wanting to make videos for quite a while now. I've just been really slack and never gotten around to it, but I've finally found some time to put aside, so I'm really keen to start filming videos and sharing my journey with you as a designer. So, because this is my first video, I thought it would make sense to start from the very beginning. What is a UI designer? What is a UX designer? What's the difference between the two? How do I become one? What tools do I need to learn? What courses do I need to study? And what does the everyday workday look like? For those who don't know, UX stands for user experience and UI stands for user interface. Often you'll find people like myself who are both UX, UI designers, but in larger companies or in very specialized roles, you'll find that UX and UI designers are often separate people focusing on separate tasks and skills. UX and UI are actually quite separate in terms of the skills and the tools that you use, but they're really important in the sense that they work together very closely. So if you have a separate UX and UI designer, they should often be working together very closely on projects. There are needs for both separate UX designers and separate UI designers, but also people that are able to fill both. And usually that comes down to the projects that you're working on and the size of your organization. Usually large organizations will have separate teams of graphic designers, UI designers, UX researchers, UX designers, project managers, etc. Whereas smaller organizations will usually have a UX UI designer who works closely with project managers and developers and things like that. So you may be wondering, what exactly does a UI designer do that's different to a UX designer? So UX designers are focused on the what, the why, and the how. So if you're looking at an app and the login page, for example, the UX designer is concerned about, well, what happens when you first open the app? What buttons do you need to click to log in? Or what buttons do you need to click to create an account? What information do you need to provide if you're logging in, if you're creating an account? Things like that. Whereas the UI designer is focused on, well, what do the login buttons look like? What do the input fields look like? What are the colors? What are the fonts? Things like that. So they're both really important and they both play an important role together, but the skills are actually quite different. So if you look at the day-to-day life of a UX designer, they'll be focused a lot on research. So how exactly are their customers using their software? What's working well? What's going wrong? What are the pain points of the customers? Are we noticing patterns in their behavior? Have we had complaints from customers? Things like that. And based on that information, they'll be refining designs, coming up with new solutions, trialing things out and testing those with customers. And the UI designer will be focusing on the solutions that have been provided by the UX designer. So if a UX designer has found that the login page isn't working the way that they want, the UX designer might do a quick mock-up that says, hey, can we change this? Can we move this button this way? Could we add a graphic in? Something like that. So the UI designer will be focused on making those changes based on the research and the information that the UX designer has found. So you already start to notice that UX and UI design are actually quite different skills. There are some people that are really interested in both the research and the solution and the design aspects, and you'll often find them becoming UX, UI designers like myself. However, there are some people that are really interested in the people side and how people use the software and how they can provide solutions, but may not exactly be quite interested or skilled at UI design. Usually you'll find those people really focusing on UX and becoming a UX designer or a UX researcher. If you're someone that's not really interested or passionate about the people side, but you're really interested in the design side, then UI design is probably the route for you. So let's say that you've made a decision and you're really interested in seeking the route of a UX designer, seeking the route of a UI designer, or maybe want to dabble in a bit of both. Where exactly do you start? Well, I think it's really important, regardless of whether you're interested in becoming a UX designer or a UI designer, to understand both sides of the fence and do research and learn what it takes to be a UX designer and what it takes to be a UI designer. UX designers that understand typography, layout, colors will be much stronger than UX designers that don't have a background in that. And similarly, UI designers that understand user-centered design and design thinking principles will be a lot stronger than those that don't. So where do I start? Well, step one, I'd say, is to understand the theory. There are heaps of resources out there that will run you through design theory and user experience and design thinking theory. I'll do some other videos about them, but that's important. I wouldn't suggest jumping into any design software, or jumping into any research projects, anything like that, before you understand the basics and the theory. So for designers, you should really understand basic concepts like hierarchy, proximity, contrast, all of those sorts of things. And for UX designers, you really need to understand design thinking and the psychology behind how people use applications, some of the theories out there as well. And there are plenty of websites that run through the theory in quite a lot of detail, and I can put some of those in the links below. So that's step one. So step two is to start fiddling with tools. So for UX and UI designers, I both strongly recommend that you try software like Figma. So Figma is a design prototyping tool designed for applications and websites. It's fast becoming the industry standard. There are plenty of other tools out there as well, like Sketch and Envision, that you can check out. But for me personally, I think Figma is a really good starting point because that allows you to fiddle with wireframes, with high fidelity mockups, and with prototyping all in the one platform. For UI designers, it's also important to fiddle with software like Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop. It's always important to have those graphic design skills alongside those user interface design skills. And for UX designers, it's time to start looking into how do you create user personas? How do you conduct user testing? How do you create a user story and a journey map? There's a lot of tools out there that explain those things, and I'll do some videos down the track as well. Step three is to actually work on a project. So if you are a UI designer, have a look out there for an app that's not really designed very well or a website that could look better, and redesign it. Put your creative spin on it and start building your portfolio. For UX designers, you can do something similar. Look for an app that's poorly designed, has a bad workflow, doesn't really make much sense, and sort of pick it apart. Try to understand who are the people that are using the app, what are their interests, what do they want out of that particular app. Start creating user personas and categorizing the types of people that use the app and understand exactly what they're looking for. From there, you can create wireframes and user flows and customer journey maps, which can then be designed in an application like Figma, whether that's by yourself or a UI designer down the track. So once you've sort of gotten to the hang of the workflow of a UX designer or the workflow of a UI designer, it's important to start creating a portfolio. When you are interviewing for jobs, whether as a UX or UI designer, potential employers want to see your skills and the work that you've worked on in the past. If you've never worked as a UX or UI designer before, a portfolio is going to be your main reference point. For design jobs, portfolios are so much more important than, for example, job references on an application. So you really want to make sure that you've got a really solid portfolio. The only way to build up a portfolio is to work on projects. Whether they're projects that you've created for yourself, or they could be projects for small businesses that you've offered to do for a low cost. It's really important that you start building the portfolio. Then, of course, I would recommend you join communities. So the best way to become a good UX UI designer and to potentially land a job is to network. Have a look on websites like Meetup and see if there are any UX UI design communities in your area. Have a look on things like Facebook. Join groups on Reddit. Start understanding what is going on in the UX UI design space and start learning from people around you. And then when you're ready, you should be good to start applying for UX UI design jobs or freelancing and start working on paid projects. So that was a really quick overview, and there's a lot of information, especially in steps 1 and 2, which is about learning the theory and learning the tools. But I won't go into those theories and tools and the detailed stuff in this video because we'll do that in a later video. But there's your good starting point. So remember, step 1 is to really focus on learning the theory. Step 2 is to start fiddling with tools and learning how those tools work. Step 3 is to start building your portfolio and working on projects. Step 4 is to start networking, learn from people around you, join groups, chat to people. And then you should eventually be ready for step 5, which is applying for jobs or starting to freelance. Well, good luck. I'll see you in the next video and where we can start talking about the theory in UX design and the theory in UI design. I'll see you then.